Greetings and welcome to the Office of Educational Supports Coordinated Supports District Informational Webinar. This is a pre-recorded version of those webinars that were hosted by our office on December 13th, 14th, and 16th. We are doing this pre-recorded version to allow for those who were unable perhaps to join us on any of the previously held webinars, and or for those who just simply want the opportunity to go back and review any information that we may have shared today and to just recap so that we are all on the same page and we know where we're going. With that in mind, I should say that at the end of this presentation, you will find information for myself, Corinne Edwards, the Director of the Office of Educational Supports, as well as for our Assistant Directors, Mr. Michael Powell and Mrs. Jen Saylor. Any one of us would be happy to assist you. You reach out to us via email with any questions that you may have, particularly again, since this is a pre-recorded session, we will not have time for active Q&A. So if you have any questions at the end of this presentation, or you just want to follow up with any one of us, myself, Jen, or Michael, feel free to do so. So let's jump right into the information that we want to share with you today. OES Coordinated Supports in our efforts to support those schools that reside in districts that will have been identified for as eligible for coordinated supports efforts. So as we engage in this work, our mindset is really based on two thoughts. First of all, a quote from C.S. Lewis, which says that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. With that in mind, ours is not a blame game, but rather an opportunity for us to breathe hope and action into our quest to realize the top 10 strategic education plan guiding principle number 4, which says all students are provided every opportunity to achieve the broadest range of life streams. For us in OES, that means supporting districts and schools to build sustainable systems that will impact life outcomes for our true north. And we think of our true north as our students. Although this is the first year that OES has been asked to officially join the coordinated supports efforts as outlined by ESSA, providing ongoing supports specific to assisting districts in initiatives to improve outcomes for students is embedded across the work across our office in various units within our office. In most cases, whether it is dealing with state and federally funded initiatives and programs, curriculum instruction, English learners, at-risk and other special populations, literacy, or continuous improvement, many of you, our colleagues, and those in our districts and ISDs have engaged and worked with either our consultants and or our managers in this office for many, many years. And with that being said, human capacity for increased coordinated support services within our office is a reality. As such, we are looking to leverage partnerships with our ISD and research service providers, as well as district leaders to ensure appropriate supports for schools identified for CSI and or ATS are provided. So our service affirmation in this work is before you on the screen. It says, if we leverage partnerships in the field, this is our belief, that if we can leverage the partnerships in the field and within MDE, then LEAs with schools identified for coordinated supports will have the on-time wraparound services needed to prepare for and implement their unique improvement work with fidelity so that the needs of all students are met. So that's really the grounding and the mindset that's bringing OES, or the Office of Educational Supports, into this work. But before we talk about what we're going to do, I think it's important that we also address very, very briefly the why, right? How do we get here? So we're going to do just a real quick recap of school accountability, but I want you also to look at the information that is provided on this slide in terms of the website, where one can go to find out additional information regarding school accountability and the Michigan School Index. I would also implore each and every one of you, if you have not already done so, Please take every opportunity to avail yourself to the resources that are provided by our Office of Educational Accountability and Assessment, or OEAA. This is the information to their website. They have also hosted many webinars, much like this one, that speaks specifically to the accountability, the school index, and how, again, one might unpack the data to make sure that you know why you are being identified, or your schools are being identified for this work. So let's get into just that real quick recap that we spoke about. So we know that Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, is the federal reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. ESSA is the nation's education law and represents a long-standing commitment to equal opportunity for all students. As such, ESSA does require that each state establish a statewide accountability system for public schools in that state. The school index is Michigan's accountability system established to comply with the requirements of ESSA. The school index is used to identify schools for support to improve student academic achievement. It should be noted here that MDE efforts regarding the review of data and information used as part of the school index for accountability is done again by the Office of Educational Assessment and Accountability, or OEAA. And again, we ask that any questions related to the why, how, and specifics regarding the school index components should be directed to the MDE accountability mailbox. Once schools are identified for a specific level of support, this information is then shared within MDE, including OES. During the pandemic, ESSA accountability was temporarily halted. The school year 2022-23 restarts the ESSA accountability requirement using spring 2022 statewide assessment data. Schools and districts, including public school academies, with schools identified for supports in the fall right now, or just previously in November, will be assigned to work with either the Office of Partnership Districts, OPD, or with us, the Office of Educational Supports, OES. OES supports will be aligned with those required elements as articulated in ESSA. ESSA references 3 federal support categories for which SCAs should identify schools. And this specific chart speaks to the support category name, and then of course the frequency and duration of support. So we have CSI, Comprehensive Support and Improvement, which is a 3-year cohort. We have ATS, Additional Targeted Support, which is a 6-year cohort. And then we have TSI, or Targeted Support and Improvement, which is a yearly cohort. And we will re-engage with this chart a little later, but I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, the frequency and duration of the support category, or the cohort, if you will, is locked. We cannot veer to the right or to the left. For CSI, it's 3 years. For ATS, it's 6 years. And for TSI, it is an annual identification, and those cannot be altered by the state. Those are ESSA required. So let's talk a little bit about visually thinking about the comparison of the support category attributes and the required actions. So we will see this chart throughout the presentation, but I do want to point out that we have the support category, we have the breadth of issue, or meaning where that support category is initiated, the cohort, or how often that designation is given, who has the primary responsibility, oversight, and then exiting. So if you look horizontally across this chart, you will see that CSI is school-based, and it should be noted that all identifications are at the school building level, whether it's CSI, ATS, or TSI. Districts are not identified for support, school buildings are. So as we engage with these support categories and we drill down deeper into the level of services that will be required, it should be noted that those efforts are being, targeted at our school-based initiatives, but we also know that schools reside within districts, right? So we have to work as that three-pronged stool, I like to call it, or the three-legged stool, where you have the SEA or the State Education Association, our ISD partners and resources, and our district, providing that the foundation for the support or the seat, which is the district or the school that school resides in, that then supports the students. So we'll look at CSI. Again, we're talking about a school issue, something holistically within the school needs to be addressed. It is a 3-year designation. The district primarily is responsible for the support to that school to provide, to develop its improvement plan, to make sure that that plan is being monitored and implemented with fidelity. The state does have some degree of oversight, if you will, in that each school that is identified for CSI supports will need to provide the state with a school level plan, which the state will review and approve. And then the state sets the exit criteria for CSI status. Where ATS is concerned, again, it is at the school level, but now we're talking about a specific subgroup within that school. It is a 6-year cohort or a 6-year identification rotation. The school oversees the work predominantly that goes on in relation to the ATS initiatives. The district reviews the school level plan and has that oversight, and then the state sets exit criteria. And then with TSI, again, we're talking about a subgroup within that school, yearly or annual identification. The school is responsible for the ongoing efforts of plan to address the TSI areas of need. The district remains constant oversight with that particular initiative. And then the district sets the exit criteria for TSI on an annual basis. So having said that, let's look now at the coordinated supports effort and the services that will be provided by OES within each of those respective categories. So as an overview, the information shared today outlines the OES intended plan of action in coordinated supports initiatives process as shared with the State Board of Education in August and December of 2022. Again, understanding the capacity, resources, and supports that will be necessary to implement CSI and or ATS coordinated technical assistance and support services with fidelity to ESSA basic requirements. OES welcomes the opportunity to work in collaboration with district leaders and local ISD resources and partners to realize identified goals to impact life outcomes for students. Again, as I spoke about that three-leg stool, the SEA, the ISD RESA, the district, providing that support for the base, right, which is the school, which would be the seat upon which or within which those students sit. So if you can think about a three-leg stool, the base of that, seat of that is that school level that those three entities are supporting, and then that school ultimately supports the student who sits in the seat of that. So as we engage in this work, the recognizing the importance of the work, our OES family will approach this as a full office-wide initiative, a whole team approach. Designated consultants from each of our 7 units will be designated and assigned to support our efforts. With that said, an OES coordinated supports point of contact, or what we call a CSPC, will be assigned to work with each district with identified schools. The CSPC will coordinate services between OES units and other MDE offices with local ISDs and RESAs and our district leaders to customize services to address the specific needs of the district and its schools identified for supports. Our regional and other OES consultants will serve as CSPCs to support district schools, and the current OES structure of the 5 statewide regional support areas will serve as the foundation for the CSPC assignments. But I want to put a plug there or a pin there and just say that Note there that we're not only utilizing our regional consultants, but we're using our state. All of the consultants within our office may be tapped to serve as a CSPC. So I don't want you to say, well, I live in this region and this is my regional consultant for federal programs, so that must be my CSPC. That may or may not be the case. While many of our districts, you will be working with your familiar, if you will, regional consultant, your school or district may be assigned to work with one of our other consultants out of one of the other units, not just the regional field consultants, but one of our other consultants representing one of our other units may be assigned to work with you as well. Again, it is a family affair for us here at OES in this coordinated supports work effort. So we are all coming together to make sure that we're providing the most consistent and the most positive and productive coordinated supports experience that we can. With that said, we are taking all efforts and all measures to ensure that our CSPCs receive the appropriate, relevant, and necessary job embedded professional development and training necessary to ensure that we have the capacity for successful implementation of this work. So let's jump into the respective categories of support. So, districts supported by OES may have schools identified for CSI that are either alternative or virtual schools with one or more of the following criteria. In the bottom 5%, with a 4-year graduation rate of 67% or less, were previously identified for CSI and did not exit CSI due to unimproved proficiency, or were previously identified for ATS and not exiting ATS, which then converts to CSI. Our CSI schools may also be non-alternative education or virtual schools, meeting one of the following criteria. Previously identified for CSI and not exiting due to unimproved proficiency, but are no longer in the bottom 5%, and or previously identified for ATS and not exiting ATS, which converts to CSI. So let's go back to that handy dandy chart that we looked at earlier, which reflected and defined the support categories and attributes required by ESSA. Here, I would like to reflect specifically on the attributes and required actions as it relates to CSI. Key reflections here are that the district is required to work with each school identified for CSI supports to ensure the timely preparation, completion, and later implementation of its school plan. So remember, when we're talking about CSI, it is a school level identification for support, not systems, school level. The district will oversee that work, but OES and our ISD and RESA partners will be, elbow partners right there with you, engaged from the start. We want to be there with you from the start to help to unpack and uncover those issues and concerns that may be contributing to the CSI support category identification. The state will have some oversight as it relates to the review and approval of that school level CSI plan. And the state then will determine the exit criteria for that plan. In this case, the state, OES represents the state, right? And so we will be reviewing those school level plans for each school, and we'll work with the district to monitor the implementation and progress of that plan, moving toward that 3-year goal of exiting out, right? To impact change and to realize those identified outcomes for students. In other words, the SEA, the ISD, RESA, the district, and the school will all partner and share in the completion of these efforts. So what are these efforts and what will they look like? Well, OES assigned staff, or our CSPCs, will work cooperatively and collaboratively across our units with other offices in the department as appropriate, and with our local ISD and RESA partners to provide that CSI coordinated support services, which will include regular meetings with district and school leaders to establish rapport and develop a collaborative approach to address the reason for CSI support identification. coordinate services with and between district leaders, local ISD and RESA partners, and other MDE offices to customize services to address the needs of districts with identified schools. Guide in the revision of each school's annual improvement plan to include CSI specific ESSA required items, including evidence-based interventions to address the specific areas of need identified in the comprehensive needs for each school. We will also identify and make accessible to districts and schools a suite of survey tools and resources to address operational, fiscal, and systemic barriers to improvement. Work to identify support for technical assistance and professional development as requested in areas of identified need, including resource allocation review, and conduct an annual review and approval of school level plans, providing guidance as necessary for revisions based upon progress, monitoring of established goals for improvement. So let's look a little bit more in depth at the district actions as it relates to comprehensive support and improvement. As it relates to ESSA, Section 111D1B, the comprehensive support and improvements, district action as it relates to the CSI and as articulated in ESSA, the district serves, as we remember that chart, the district serves as the primary facilitator. The SEA, the ISD and RESA, where there's elbow partners, but ESSA is clear in that the district is driving this train and is working in partnership with the school building leadership so that that plan that is being developed by the school is locally developed and implemented with student outcomes in mind. So that means that you have all of the respective leaders at the table. You have not only that building level leader, but you have school, the teacher leaders, your school improvement coordinators, parents, students, if you know you're at that age where students can be of value to bringing in their thoughts and ideas around it. So we want to have a holistic approach to developing the school level plan, and the district is leading that charge. So we've been talking about these plans. What does ESSA say is required in these plans? Well, the plan is, as ESSA is specific in that these 4 areas need to be addressed in the school level plan. First of all, the plan needs to be informed by all indicators of the school index. So whatever those indicators were that resulted in the support identification status, those are the things that you're looking to address. The plan should include evidence-based interventions to address those identifiers, as well as any of the school level needs that are uncovered as you're going through that comprehensive needs assessment. And then identifies resource inequities, which may mean resource allocation review. The plan approval, ESSA is clear. The following entities must approve the plan. First, the school building leadership, right? The leadership, the school improvement team will develop this plan, agree to it, we're good to go. The district will review the plan, agree to it, and then that specific CSI school plan will be submitted to the SCA or MDE. In this case, OES will serve in the capacity of MDE to receive and review those CSI school level plans. And these are plans that are, it's not the district plan that we're used to, doing every year. That's still, this is not impacting that. That work still has to go on, right? You still have to submit your district level plan annually based upon what we're doing. Remember, comprehensive support and improvement, this coordinated support effort is around the building. So these plans are specific to the building. Once that plan is submitted, then again, MDE will serve as elbow partners with our ISD and our district to ensure that the plan is being monitored and implemented with fidelity, and that progress is being charted along the way. So how do we go about getting this plan done? Well, we are truly leaning into and encouraging districts to leverage the MyKit process to review and revise, if necessary, the current school improvement plans for those schools that have been identified for CSI supports. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Rather, we're trying to look at what we have, unpack that. As we go through the MyKit process, we will engage in those conversations that will allow us to complete a comprehensive needs assessment, to review the reasons for CSI identification, to unpack and uncover the root cause analysis to identifying underlying causes of the problem, right? We know that it may be that, your ELA scores may be there, but what is the problem? What is the underlying cause? We're seeing the symptoms, but what's the underlying cause? Is it attendance? Is it student engagement? Is it whatever it is? But underlying that root cause, so we can really get to the meat of the matter and diagnose that. If we can treat that, then we can expect that our symptoms or the outcomes of those root causes will get better, right? Review of available funding to identify resources for implementation of school level plans. That's where your resource allocation review comes into play, looking at how the system, in this case, as well as the school building, utilizes its resources, whatever those resources might be, and the equitable sharing of those resources with specificity to meeting the needs of that building. How is that being done? It helps also leveraging the MyKit process will help us to revise as necessary the school improvement plan, again, to address the root cause, to document alignment with the school level CSI plan, excuse me, document alignment of the school level plan with the district improvement plan, right? Schools don't operate as independent silos. They sit within a system. And so making sure that whatever the plan of action is as articulated and identified for that school level plan is aligned with what the system and how the system is going to support the forward positive and progressive development and implementation of that plan moving forward. So let's talk a little bit now about additional targeted support, or ATS. Districts identified for support by OES that have schools identified for ATS have both one or more student subgroups consistently underperforming across components of the school index, and one or more student subgroups in the bottom 5% overall. Districts with schools identified for ATS will be supported by OES as requested by the district, using the same protocols and services as outlined for schools identified for CSI and supported by OES. So why did I put in as requested by the district? Let's go back to this handy dandy comparison chart. And now let's focus on ATS. Horizontally, again, we're looking across the category. Speaking to the subgroup, we just looked at that and how we identify based upon subgroups and the performance of specific subgroups within that school. Remember, we're still talking school level identification. It is a 6-year journey. The school is really the driving force around the implementation and the development of the plan. The district has then oversight of that plan. And if you notice, the state, particularly in that plan oversight with CSI, the state was there. So we were going to be receiving and reviewing those plans. With ATS, you don't see that there. The district receives that plan, approves that plan, and then follows through with oversight of that plan. However, the state will be setting exit criteria. As such, we still want to be a part of that conversation. So when we're at the table and we're having those conversations around CSI and the work and the initiatives that are going forward with those buildings that have been identified for CSI support, we also want to engage with you in that support efforts around those schools that have been identified for ATS support, right? Again, that Threeleg stool. We want to be there to support both CSI and ATS, understanding that the state fully understands that we're there at the discretion of the district, right? And providing whatever resources and supports we can. But we do want to make sure that you understand that we want to be with you in that journey for not only the CSI, but the ATS identified supports as well. So what does ESSA say about ATS plans? So according to ESSA section 111D2C, let's talk about the plans under ATS. So school action. Before with CSI, remember the first word or that highlighted word was district action, right? Or phrase was district action. Here is school action. So in partnership with those having critical perspectives, again, all of the major players, right? Stakeholders at the table of that specific school, coming together to really unpack and talk about and think how we can develop a locally focused and implementable ATS plan for our school to improve student outcomes for each specific population of students that are the subject of the notification. So remember, ATS is about that subgroup, right? Or subgroups. So we need to look at how is this plan going to address the needs of that subgroup, not whole. CSI is a holistic, right? Across the building. ATS is specific to that identified student population. So with that in mind, the ATS plan needs to have these three criteria. It must be informed by all indicators of the school index. It includes evidence-based interventions, and then of course identifies resource inequities, or that resource allocation review is again a necessity. The plan approval, school approves the plan, the district approves the plan. Again, here you do not see where there's any SEA approval necessary. So school and district, and then the district monitors the implementation and ongoing progress of that plan. But again, you know, we just want to make sure that you know that we want to be a part of that process with you. And as it relates to the resource allocation review, we've talked about that before, and I just want to mention again that the resource allocation review is just the process by which the LEA engages in an inquiry around the way it utilizes its resources to support building need, okay? So again, as it relates to the preparation of each school's ATS plan, we strongly encourage districts and schools to leverage the MyKit process to review and, if necessary, revise the current school plan for the school that has been identified for ATS supports. Some of the same experiences will take place as we're going through the MyKit process to develop that ATS plan, right? The comprehensive needs assessment, the root cause analysis. We're going to do that RAR, the review of available funding, or that resource allocation review, making those revisions as necessary to each school's improvement plan to address the root cause of the problem, documenting the alignment of that school level plan, and that it aligns with the district plan, and then monitoring the implementation of that plan. And then finally, let's talk about targeted support and improvement, or TSI. So districts with schools only identified for TSI will be primarily supported through universal supports provided by MDE to all districts, plus specific communication regarding TSI. That might be resources explaining the TSI identification and guidance regarding the TSI plan requirement. So let's talk a little bit about, again, why the universal support approach. Back to our comparison chart. Now we're at TSI. Again, we're talking about subgroups. It is an annual identification, but you will see the state is nowhere on this horizontal progress chart. So the school, again, implements the development and forward progress of that plan. The district has oversight of the continuance of that plan and monitoring with fidelity, implementation with fidelity. And then the district sets the criteria for exiting. It determines whether or not a school exits TSI status or not. So the state has no, for lack of a better term, responsibility there, but we want to, again, be a part of those conversations with you at the table. So while we are predominantly elbow partners with you and our ISD service providers for CSI and ATS, if there is a way for us to support you with TSI, we will do as such, but know that our primary focus for being with you at the table is CSI and ATS. And as we are having those conversations, if we can support any additional need that might be there with TSI that you're unable to glean from those universal supports that might be available from MDE as a whole, provided to all schools, then we're there to do that as well. So that is, in a nutshell, the services that we're going to be providing for CSI and ATS schools that have been identified for those levels of support. Undoubtedly, we tend to get questions regarding the regional assistance grant and funding that might be necessary. And normally my colleague, Bill Witt, who is our resident guru on all things RAG, would take over this portion of the presentation. But in his absence, I'm going to go ahead and just share some information with you regarding the Regional Assistance Grant, or RAG, as we like to call it. So we know that the Regional Assistance Grant is awarded to ISDs and RESAs to support districts with schools identified for CSI, whether the district is in a partnership agreement or not, right? We want to make sure that we're clear. RAG funding is awarded to ISDs and RESAs with districts who have schools identified for support, but that support category is based on CSI or ATS, not whether or not you're in a partnership agreement or not. So eligible funding is determined by CSI status in accordance with ESSA rules for prioritizing available funding. Partnership agreements are not the basis for RAG funding eligibility. All RAG allocations are based on the number of schools identified for CSI served by ISDs and RESAs. ISDs and RESAs can support newly identified schools now with any funds that are not needed for the current cohort. However, in this work that we're looking at, as we're engaging or looking to engage in work and develop plans for 23-24, the allocation specifically awarded for newly identified schools will not start until the fall of next year, right? So we already have, RAG is a derivative of that title funding. So we already have our funding for 22-23. As such, the schools that are newly identified in the fall of 22, the RAG funding that might be available to support those efforts will not become available until the 23-24 allocation of title funding. But if there are ISDs and RESAs who are currently receiving RAG funds to support districts and schools, and the schools and the district needs have already been met, then if there are remaining funds, you may begin to look at how those funds might be leveraged to do some prep work for any newly identified schools that may be under your district or ISD watch. And if you have further questions about that, again, feel free to reach out to Bill Witt, and he'd be happy to talk with you about that. But we just want to make sure that we're clear that one, RAG funding that may be available to ISDs is not based upon whether or not that district is in a partnership agreement or not, is based on, as ESSA points out, CSI status. Those funds are limited. So we are going to be utilizing those funds based upon ESSA. And the funds, according to ESSA, have to be used to support schools that have been identified for CSI, ATS, and TSI. However, we know that because funding is limited, we have to award those funds to the neediest of the needy, right? And the neediest of the needy is those CSI schools. And so as funding is made available, we will look to determine, the number of schools that we have and how that funding can be allocated and to serve the greatest need, right? We want to make sure that those awards are substantive enough to make impact. And so that's why We really look at the neediest of the needy as it relates to RAG funding, okay? So again, if you have any additional questions regarding RAG or Regional Assistance Grant, feel free to reach out to Bill Witt, and he will be happy to support and answer any additional questions you may have. But as a foundational understanding and awareness, we wanted to make sure that we did include this information, and perhaps that would address some of the questions, surface questions that you may have regarding the RAG funding. So next steps, what are we asking of our partner schools, ISDs, and districts as we engage in this work? Okay, so superintendents did receive a notification. In that notification was the name of the CSPC, or the Office of Educational Supports, Coordinated Supports point of contact. And in that letter, it did ask that the superintendent identify a district coordinated supports lead and forward that name of that person and his or her email information to the district's assigned CSPC. Once the CSPC receives this information, he or she will make contact with the district's identified coordinated supports lead to not only get acquainted, but to also establish some dates and times for connected. This is so important. So if I have superintendents on the line or you're watching, please, ma'am, please, sir, if you have not reached out to your OES identified coordinated supports point of contact and shared with him or her the information of your district coordinated supports lead, please do so. We ask that that information be shared by December 9th. If you have not done so, please do so that our OES CSPC can go about the business and start the process of reaching out to your district lead, making that contact and establishing connections and making sure that we can move forward in a timely manner. It is critical that we have one point of contact so that we have one road of information in, one road of information out, and that we're not chasing after each other to make sure that we're connecting, right? And to the extent practical and possible, our CSPCs will make every effort to include our ISD and RESA partners on emails and communications that go out so that, again, we can have that three-legged stool approach in supporting that building which supports then those students, our true north. So please, ma'am, please, sir, if you have not done that, please do so. If you have already done that, thank you, thank you, thank you for your cooperation and for helping to jumpstart our ability to engage in this work with you. So as we look across this 3-year journey, let's talk about what that really means in terms of next steps for OES, right? So we talked about the initial consultation happening once your CSPC receives your district level lead. Then they'll begin the process of establishing those meetings, dates, and times so that we can begin to make regular connections with the school. In this year 1, we will be providing guidance and support as requested by the district as you complete the resource allocation review that is addressed in ESSA, a guidance in the revision of each school's improvement plan to align with the ESSA required CSI components, and that it includes evidence-based interventions. And then we're going to also continue to coordinate the process for review and SEA approval and submission of those school level plans. And I will put a pin there and say that we will, in early spring of 2023, we will be providing schools and districts with the process by which the SEA, or in this case, OES, on behalf of the Michigan Department of Ed, will be not only receiving those plans, the protocol and the process by which those plans will be submitted, but also the process of approval for our review of those plans and approval. So watch for that information to come and additional webinars that will be able to provide you with technical assistance and support in how to submit those plans at the appropriate time. In years 2 and 3, we will be in the monitoring phase, right? So we will continue to, or at least our CSPC will continue to have that interaction with your district to monitor the progress and ongoing implementation of the submitted plan. We'll continue to coordinate technical assistance with all of our partners and any content area specialists that might be necessary to, again, support the need of the school as it is implementing the initiatives articulated in the improvement plan, and then monitoring that plan to ensure that the progress is going, making any tweaks that might be necessary. Again, right, that continuous improvement. So as the school is engaging in the implementation of that plan, having those ongoing conversations around how that plan is progressing, the outcomes, how's that working for us, right? And if it's not, then making those tweaks, again, leveraging that MyKit process to continue to monitor and make continuous improvements to ensure that we're doing what is best for all kids in this forward progress plan. So with that being said, normally this is the part in our presentation where we would take questions. Given that this is a pre-recorded session, we won't do that, but I will take this opportunity to just say thank you on behalf of the Michigan Department of Ed, and more specifically, the Office of Educational Support Leadership Team and consultants. We sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen to this pre-recorded session. And thank you again if you joined us at any one of the previous OES webinars that we provided. We want to encourage you to continue with efforts to improve and impact life outcomes for all of our students in your respective communities. We extend to you our best wishes for a positive and productive year. We want you to take care of yourself and stay safe. And as promised, if there's anything that we can do for you, again, I am Corinne Edwards, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of the Office of Educational Supports, or you may reach out to Mr. Michael Powell, who is an Assistant Director in our office, or Mrs. Jennifer Saylor, who is also Assistant Director in our office. We would be happy to talk with you and to address any questions that you may have. So with that, I just really bid you adieu and farewell, and thank you so much.